Welcome, everyone, and welcome back to our Fireside Chat. I am really excited to finally have two incredible colleagues with me today, Kaylin and Devante. And they have been on the ground campaigning in this last election and have some really incredible, interesting insider information about what they've been doing to engage with community members and to really try to get people out to vote. Devante is a colleague of mine from New York, and Kaylin is a colleague of mine from Harvard University. So I'm excited to bring these two brilliant minds together and to jump into some incredible conversation today. Devante and Kaylin, thank you so much for your time and for joining me today.
Mhm. Oh yeah, thank you for having us.
Absolutely, and I'm sorry we had some really we had some technical difficulties, and so I'm grateful that we were able to pull through it and to have this conversation. So I'm going to start off with reading both of your bios. Devante, I'll start with you, and then Kaylin, I'll quickly go through your bio, and then we'll jump into some questions about what you've learned on the campaign trail, and then what does this mean moving forward for our community members. Devonte Graham is a graduate of North Carolina A&T State University with a Bachelor's of Arts and Pre-Law. Devonte is a lifelong organizer, formerly serving as a regional field director for the Nevada State Democratic Party in 2016. In 2017, Devonte began working for one of the top political consulting firms in the Bay Area, Barnes Mosher and Partners. At BMWI, he developed messaging, organizing, and government relation programs to allow clients to effectively tell their stories with the goal of influencing decision makers in the halls of government and win at the ballot box. Devontae led the planning and management of day to day operations for political campaign and public affair clients in San Francisco Bay Area and throughout California. He also served as the president of the Black Young Democrats of San Francisco. The Black Young Democrats played a vital role in the historic elections of London Breed as the second Black mayor of San Francisco. Devontae currently works in New York City in a collaborative role between City Hall and New York City Public Schools. He led a portfolio of high priority cross functional community engagement projects in collaboration with the DOE offices. In addition to developing communication systems, protocol, and processes with the goal of improving efficiency and clarity of communications internally and externally to communities. Devante, thank you so much again for being here and welcome.
Yeah, thank you. Happy to be here.
Absolutely. And Kaylin is an advocate, an environmentalist, and strategist with over a decade of experience leading grassroots initiatives, political campaigns, and government affairs. As a high level project manager, she builds the policy platform, crafts the campaign message, and ensures the train runs on time. That's very important, Kaylin. Recently served in the Biden Harris administration at the Environmental Protection Agency as a senior advisor for intergovernmental relations. Upon graduation, her goal is to disrupt the traditional ways we look at environmental justice and ensure we heal the planet while healing ourselves. Being in nature drastically improved her mental health, and she knows others can also benefit from this. She's also a first generation Colombian Guatemalan from North Carolina. I absolutely love that, Kaylin. Also,
Mhm.
my favorite niece Abby is from Guatemala.
Oh,
So
yay.
yeah,
Thank
so
you so much.
Kaylin,
Aggie Pride.
Mhm.
I love it. Kaylin and Devontae, again, I'm really excited
Mhm.
to jump in and just learn first what inspired you to get into the political world. And in covering the last election with Kamala Harris being grassroots on the ground, what were some of the things that you learned or some of the lessons learned on the ground? And we can start with Kaylin and then go to Devontae.
Mhm.
Thank you again, Shaniqua. So I have previously worked on the Obama reelection campaign and the Hillary campaign. This campaign was completely different only because there were 107 days to execute a campaign. So just taking that in mind, I think several factors. come into play. As far as for like specifically the Latino community, which is a demographic I primarily have focused on, it's been dark and a real awakening for people to really our community is very nuanced and the messaging we have for like this demographic needs to be tailored and be intentional, understanding that like all but from the so I think that's definitely one lesson. But I will say that as someone who did spend some time on the ground in North Carolina, um, field strategy in play versus like the Trump campaign that didn't really have a field game. And I think, that's definitely something that we need to consider taking into consideration moving forward as far as like executing continue money on the ground. It's so critical when you're like knocking on doors and talking to voters face to face versus through like political.
Thank you so much, Kaylin. And it sounds like there was some overlapping between both of you at North Carolina. So I'm interested to hear the other side. But
Mhm.
Devonte, you also you've been involved in the political landscape for quite some time, serving as a former Black Democrat in San Francisco. I'm wondering if you can speak to like your why, what got you into this work, and then what were some of your lessons learned on the ground as well.
Of course. So I'll start with my why. I'll start with my upbringing in Tallahassee, Florida, and we have a saying in Tallahassee that the more northern Florida you get, the more southern it gets in a way. And so, so growing up, I kind of witnessed how the systemic inequities could shape the lives of people in my community. Then attending a historically Black university further deepened my understanding of power of collective action and the importance of creating pathways for marginalized voices to be heard. Um, and I would say, in terms of this campaign, what my role was, I was in charge of coordinating our HBCU tours that the vice president went on. And also just meeting those college students where they're at. We had a wide range of different thoughts and values on our college campuses. I think that's where you really trying to develop your thoughts and habits and things like that. And so the main component that those students wanted to know about was jobs. Will we have a job when we get out? What about inflation, student loan debt, and those things? And just telling that message to a majority of an African American student base, and just really just capitalize on that messaging. And one of the important roles that I played in that was setting up voting places on the college campuses. Because sometimes beforehand we had to take our college students and move them to a different location to go vote. But also, I think it really played a really important part having that voting base inside located on the campus. I've seen a huge turnout among Greensboro, North Carolina A&T State University. So we really did really well in that area. The college campus in Atlanta did really well. The college campus in Richmond, Virginia did really well. So we're really happy about that. And also in Philadelphia with Lincoln University, we did really well. And that was one of the things I put in place and just advocated for, just having that voting place on campus for students just to go register and vote. But the lessons I learned on the ground was we have to improve our communication. We have to talk to the voters without the college degrees. With the high school educated voters that making end up between that $30,000 to $75,000 range. How we communicate with those voters, how we make sure they're not overlooked or dismissed or not included in our big tent party, as we like to say. And so I think we improve our messaging on that and just tell folks how we are planning to make their lives better in an economical way. I think that'll go forward. And I think that was missing in this campaign, just that uh, focus on the working class man or woman and things like that. And so I think going around, I think we'll revamp that messaging and reach out to those folks and bring them into the fold. I think that would be very important.
Thanks, Devonte. Thank you so much, Kaylin. And my next question, and we can start with you again, Kaylin, is around what have you been hearing? What are people concerned about? What are their needs? One of the things I think we've been talking a lot about, at least at the Kennedy School, has been the lack of sort of missing the needs, missing what people are actually concerned about on the ground. And I'm wondering if you having that sort of close up connection and experience with community engagement, with grassroots, and with operation strategies. have you heard and what have you heard on the ground in terms of what people are concerned about?
A lot. I don't really even know where to start on that question. I think some of the immediate things that I'm hearing through the grapevines, whether that's through like my Obama alumni chat or like climate voter groups and just like different communities that I'm a part of, is like Devontae mentioned messaging. I think it's not trickling down to the communities on the ground that we normally have relied on for their vote. So it's just, figuring out, how do we fix our messaging strategy? How do we let the American people know, for example, the wins that the Biden-Harris administration, people don't feel that, and I think that's what was missing. I mean, President Biden did a lot, and the Harris administration did a lot of great work from Bill and IRA, CHIPS Act, but like, how does that directly impact your voter, like someone that's not in the political bubble, like if you're not part of that community, if you're not like in the weeds of MSNBC or, CNN, I mean, then you don't really know how these, huge initiatives impact you. So I think it's definitely tailored messaging and people understanding that, taking voters for granted. I think, something that the Democratic Party unfortunately has done a lot throughout the years, money and resources in our community. For example, in North Carolina, I saw a lot of money spent on Republican Harris. Where were those Republicans for Harris when it came down to election day? So it's thinking about your base and actually investing and focusing in your base and getting them out to vote, and not forgetting, like, you know, how do we get this messaging in a way that is not also like so elitist. You're not using big nuanced words. Like, let's talk how we are talking right now to the American people.
Thank you so much, Kaylin. That's I think that this is so important that people want realness. They want authenticity.
Mhm.
Going through real problems. I think about the way that the world has changed and shifted since COVID. And the reality is, the world isn't the same. We're not living in the same world that we were living in 4 years ago. Like, as you mentioned, issues of inflation and issues of housing and economic development. And people want to know, can they pay their bills? Can they buy some bread and some milk or eggs or food to eat? Or can they keep a roof over their head? These are the issues I think that people are really concerned about. And of course, education in schools, which leads me to you, Devante. You have been in the New York City public schools doing incredible work, specifically with the high schools around mental health and higher education. And I'm wondering if you can speak to some of your work there in New York City schools, and whether you have had the opportunity to sort of civically engage some of the schools that you have worked with in New York City.
Mhm. So yeah, so we've done a lot of work around mental health services, but I think our biggest push was our New York City Reads initiative, where we were redefining the way students are learn to read, going back to a phonetic approach. I know when I was growing up, we had what we call hooked on phonics, and so that was always helpful for us. But just overall, New York City public schools, it's been a big push to get our students more civically engaged in terms with internships. Developing those private public partnerships. I know we've been working with IRAs on a couple of different initiatives that are really going to get our students college and career ready. And so we're very excited about that. I think that's one of the mayor's greatest initiatives, but we want to focus on trades and different things like that. And so I think that's been very important and very key for the success of this administration in terms of education. And so we're really looking forward to keep partnering with these outside organizations, but also improving our teachers and things like that with different professional learning opportunities in all those different areas. And so I'm really excited about it. I think a lot of our parents are really excited about the direction that we're going in New York City public schools in terms of all those aspects, in terms of civic engagement, reading, math, In entrepreneurship, we're really trying to emphasize that as well, because we know some of our students may not want to go on that college path, but equipping them with the tools to be very successful where they want to go out and be a plumber or electrician and things like that, providing those with those skills starting early, as soon as ninth grade. So I think that's been very important.
Absolutely. Thank you for that, and definitely agreed. There is certainly a shift is essentially in New York City around economic development and
Mhm.
really workforce development. I've been seeing a lot of initiatives within the city of New York. So I
Oh
think
yeah.
kudos to the job and the work that you guys are doing. I think our kids, and again, going back to people's fear, right,
Hmm.
and desire for financial stability, especially post COVID-19. So I'm glad that you've been doing incredible work with New York City schools
Hmm.
around and helping our students. One of the things that we noticed in New York City schools, especially with high schoolers, is
Hmm.
a missing number of kids that were enrolled in New York City schools. I think the number prior to the pandemic was around 1.2 million kids, and that
Hmm.
number has since dropped to around 800,000. And so
Hmm.
we're sort of trying to figure out where did all those children go. But one of the theories behind that is a lot of kids have dropped out to get a job to
Hmm.
support their families. And so, again, these are the themes that we're seeing, that community members are concerned with their with financial stability and with economic development.
Hmm.
Um, Kaylin, I am really interested in your work around environmental justice and what you've been doing, and disrupting the traditional perspectives around that. And I'm wondering if you can speak to what has your work been, on the ground, especially with the campaign around environmental justice, and then what should we be concerned about, and what should we be focusing on, post these elections around environmental justice?
For sure. So I definitely was helping out framing some of the messaging that went out on climate justice, particularly with the community, as far as what we should be concerned about. Um, there's definitely a lot. When you're thinking about the environmental space, you have to remember that it's sectional in the sense that, like, we can't just think about America, we think about the entire world. Things that, the amount of carbon that we're emitting here is not going to impact our communities, but it will impact marginalized communities, or that's an island that might not be around in 30 years, to a drought in like South Sudan. Um, it, the thing about the environment is that it's interconnected and it brings us all together. Um, as far as I think what people can do right now is definitely just being more informed at the local level, so decisions that get made at the local level that impact you. Um, so I think as far as like, going to a city council meeting, attending like a mayor forum, uh, that's like the best way I personally think to make an impact and really, be part of change that you want to see in your community. I always encourage people to also just like take time, just go on a, like, literally just touch grass, like touch dirt, like
I
go
love
out.
that.
Like I think right now a lot of people need to look inward. And so I'm really pushing that, we need to take care of ourselves throughout the next couple of years. So spend some time outdoors, get involved in your local community, be part of a local like community garden, like, go with your
I
neighbor,
love it.
Hmm.
get some fresh produce with no chemicals, no pesticides, and let's like, let's take a step back and like let's take care of ourselves. And no, there's no better way to do it than getting outdoors, going for a walk, go on a bike. I mean, that's all sustainable too. So you win, we all win.
That thing's so incredible, Kaylin. Just the simplicity, but also the potency of connecting back with the environment. And you touched on mental health, that being one of the major things I think people are facing, especially post-election. Half of the nation is um, rejoicing, and the other half is probably not, maybe sobbing. And so it's a really interesting time right now. And
Yeah.
so just the mental health aspect and um, being able to figure out where do we go from here, but then how do we take care of ourselves, um, and how do we emphasize this, mental health. I have been extremely grateful, I must say, and a little biased, being a mental health advocate for the last 15 years, and champion mental health causes in New York City. I have been extremely proud of where we've come as a country, as a people, to begin to normalize talking about mental health and normalize saying that it's okay not to be
Mhm.
okay. But then these are some strategies to support and to help us. So I love the idea of connecting back to nature, joining your local civic organization or local community gardens, which I absolutely love visiting. I think it's so potent, and we don't have enough of that, especially in urban cities. So, thanks, Caitlin, for that. Devonte, something that Caitlin said that had me thinking about this idea of us being so dependent on one another. Caitlin mentioned environment justice essentially being that thing that connects all of us outside of the confinements of our four walls or our
Mhm.
nation, but also affecting um, countries abroad, well, countries outside of the U.S. I'm wondering if what does that mean, or I'm curious to learn what does that mean for our schools, with us being so dependent on other countries, so dependent on one another. What does that mean for our education system, and are there ways to reimagine our curriculum and our approach to how we teach our kids
Mhm.
with this new sort of world where we're so much dependent on one another?
Yes, absolutely. And those are the things we're working on. We've introduced a few curriculums aimed at teaching our students about the different cultures around the world. And I know we've been having some very heightened conversations, especially of what's going on in the Middle East, whether that's with Israel and Gaza, or Israel and Iran. But just having these open conversations with students and things like that, and just saying that, hey, if you see it one way or the other, doesn't make you a bad person. And we're here to help have that open dialogue. So introducing different curriculums about Jewish history or Muslim history, that's what we've been really going taking on head on. And I think that's really working. That's really encouraging conversations, those tough conversations, but also bringing us all together. Once we bring each other all together, I think we really notice that we have more things that bring us together than separate us. And I think that was the whole goal of this thing, just to have that conversation, just to sit down with each other and just talk through our differences. Explains our different perspectives and our different lived experiences and respect those. So that's the things that other countries or that we've been incorporating in New York City. And so I think we're on the right path with that. And those conversations are still tough and they're still ongoing. And I think we should just keep pushing forward with it. And I'm looking forward to what's the final outcome. But I just think the conversations need to continue. And we just have to keep bring them to the forefront and just talk about these different subjects and things like that.
I love that, Devonte. I love the fact that we're having dialogue with our kids around what's going on in the world. I think it reminds me of when I was a child in New York City schools, and we would have something called current events.
Mm-hmm.
We would talk about what's going on in the world, and I think it's so vital, especially with our kids being our future leaders and
Mm-hmm.
policymakers, that will be running the world. They will need to know how to work together, especially around conflict.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly.
and you also mentioned talking about what's going on in other countries, such as like the war in Gaza,
Mm-hmm.
of course, like what's going on in Ukraine and Russia, and parts of Sudan and other parts of Africa.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that leads me to my last question for you, Caitlin, around the migrant, the impact of what's going to happen, or what are some implications post election on the migrant population, on the migrant community, with New York City specifically being a sanctuary city, but also think of whatever other places in the U.S. But what does this mean for our migrant communities and families, and what should be organizations and communities be doing to better prepare to support our migrants during this time post election?
be really honest, I don't think we really get what will happen in 4 years. The only advice I have is for people to have plans in place, whether that's deportation, one family member, starting to figure out like what that will look like for your family. Like if one person, and like really bad, but this is the reality of the situation and like the conversation being had right now. So figuring out like you come home and your dad's no longer there, like
Mhm.
um what are the next steps? Like getting all your paperwork together. Um I, I personally have two family members who are undocumented, and the conversations that we're having right now is you can come stay with me, like you can come to Massachusetts, where laws might be a bit different, sanctuary city, or maybe there might be some resistance to states against federal government. So starting to have those plans. I know other conversations that I'm hearing is taking money out of like the banks, just really like kind of just being ready for anything. And it's hard for like for a lot of us that like these are the conversations that we need to have, but they need to so it's like how do you prepare yourself for the worst case scenario? Because we don't know. Certain things that you're hearing right now, for example, the military may be stepping in and implementing the deportations that we're seeing. I'm hearing of like Texas, certain business owners who are starting to set up like infrastructures for camps. Um, we really just need to start having tough conversations with our family members, our community members, and as allies stepping in and knowing that there's a community that might really get impacted a lot. And how can we be?
Mhm.
I know, for example, churches normally step in a lot and provide sanctuary for families. So, for example, finding out like local churches, which churches, might already have an infrastructure in place for something like this. And honestly, it's just providing like certain needs, food, clothing, basic necessities for babies. Um, but we could see some really dark times ahead, and I just really want people to be mindful and be prepared. That's all we can now is like honestly prepare the best that we can.
Thank you, Kaylin. That's a very sad reality, and it breaks my heart, especially working in New York City with so many children, especially in our New York City schools. Devontae, maybe you can
Mhm.
speak to some potential policy strategies or implications that the mayor may be thinking of, or especially in New York City schools, where we have so many
Yeah.
migrant families and youth that we work with and that we serve. If that could be a closing question for you, what are
Mhm.
some policy implications potentially in the future to support our kids and our families that may be
Mhm.
affected?
Yes, we have Project Open Arms where we welcome in migrant students that just immigrated to the United States, where and their parents are free to live in our shelters and different things while their kids attend our schools and they wait on their correct paperwork. So we're going to keep focusing on that. I know we're in a recalibration stage right now with the new administration that's coming in, and so we're really developing our policies, how we'll go forward, and our different city agencies, how they're going to work with the different federal agencies in terms of migrants and things like that. So we're still figuring that out. Those conversations, we just had a meeting on that today about that because I understand the president-elect will be in New York City in the coming days, and I know New York City was a big flashpoint in terms of like the migrants, and it was a tensions point between the mayor and the Biden administration. And so how do we navigate that? But also having conversation with the community members and things like that. Because we go to these different communities and they say, hey, Devontae, I'm all for the migrants coming in and pursuing the opportunities that America may bring, but also what about us as well, the folks that's been here? Because I know the mayor administration, we did a lot for the new coming migrants, whether that was food cards or places to stay and different incentives. And so the current New York population, like, hey, Devontae, we've been here so long, like, what can we do? But also having conversation with the the newly migrants and just talking about them, like, hey, we don't mind if some of these folks get deported, because when these migrants come in, the very few that create problems, they terrorize us first, Devontae. And how can we protect ourselves and things like that? It's only a few. It's not a mass majority of the migrants. Mass majority of migrants are well-meaning, doing everything they can just to better their lives, and they're fleeing from something that's more traumatic in the past and just looking for opportunity to succeed. But it's just a small few that kind of like gives that reputation that resonates in national news and things like that. They're just like, hey, Devontae, yeah, we wouldn't mind that if that happens to those type of folks. But majority of us and the majorities I've encountered were well-meaning folks, just looking for opportunity. So we're going to keep working on our policies in New York City and see how we're going to work with the administration. I know some administration, city agencies are not going to work with them at all, but we don't know if that's the right approach, because we do want to make sure the well-meaning folks are here, and some of the folks that are creating problems will have a different outcome for. But it's an ongoing conversation that we're going to have. So we should be know more in the future.
Thank you so much, Devontae. And my closing question for both of you is, um, what's one way, we talked about a lot tonight in a short time, a lot this afternoon, excuse me, in a short time. And it can sort of make you feel a little depressed to think about, what our world looks like post elections. But
Mhm.
what's a glimpse of hope? What's something that we can be hopeful about? I think one of the things that I love about humanity is the fact that we are resilient as a human race and we pull through. How can communities empower themselves or use their voice to continue fighting the good fight amid all of the problems that we're seeing and we're facing? Kaylin, sorry, can you close
Yeah,
this out?
for sure. Um, I think one of the things that I always rely on is counting all your wins. It could be a small win, but we need to count that win. Um, Back to boards and like taking care of ourselves, because you can't pour from an empty cup.
Mhm.
Focusing on the local level, getting involved in your community. We need to really go back to something that, we haven't seen in a while, which is like community engagement, like talking to your neighbors, like start developing conversations with people that might not look like you, values, because we share a lot more in common than similarities. And we really need to go back to that, to be honest. Um, I always, you know, when the times are coming, it's not new either. So we also have to remember that like we as people have endured and been through so much, and we need to kind of like remember that we strong, resilient. And I'm also at the end of the day, although this country was not necessarily found for us, um, to remember that the way that the founding fathers set this country up, through institutions, through our three branches of government, like let's not be, let's not forget that. They actually put a lot of stuff in place for some scenarios that may come up, and starting to see some of that happen anyways, like institutionalists coming out and like voicing concerns. So I think at the end of the day, it's um remembering, you know, really that this country, while it's not perfect, it has beauty, like democracy here as a whole, and how, I think fathers were really smart and a lot of good things that, I think we're going to start seeing coming out more and more, as we progress throughout these.
Thank you, Kaylin. I really appreciate what you said. And I just sort of want to echo just one thing is that we are resilient as a people. And it reminds me of COVID. When we went through one of the hardest times in the world, we pulled together, we pulled through, and we made it out on the other side. And I think, regardless of what we're feeling right now in this moment, might feel like a moment of defeat for so many people. I do believe that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think that light is in each of us, and it's what connects us all. So I'm grateful, and I'm hopeful that there are leaders like you, Kaylin and Devontae, and other future leaders that are rising up through in today in our communities today, to help solve a lot of these problems that we're going to see unfold. So thank you so much. I know we are at time. We are over time. Kaylin, Devontae, I want to say thank you from the bottom of my heart for your service, for what you do. Continue moving forward in environmental justice and schools and communities and cities. I'm excited to continue working with you, Kaylin, here at Harvard University, and Devontae with you in New York City schools. Thank you so much. How can people reach you should they want to reach out? Kaylin and then Devontae.
You can add me on LinkedIn, KYLI. Last year, I am transitioning off Twitter and I'm moving. Um, name on Blue Sky is it's Caitlin. So add me on Blue Sky. I hope to get more active on there. But yeah, Devontae, yeah, I'm definitely eager to connect with you too.
Oh, sounds good. And so you can also connect with me on LinkedIn, Devontae Graham, and also on Instagram if you want to message me. It's my first name, Devontae, then underscore, very simple. Facebook as well, Devontae Graham. Also on X, Devontae NYC. So you can find me there. I'm looking forward to connecting with you as well, Kayla.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much, Kaylin. Thank you, Devontae. And thank you all for watching. Do us a favor and share this message out to a friend, to a colleague. Our job and our mission here is to continue elevating and bringing information to you that supports you where you are. Thank you